We are so lucky in that moment of realization when we recognize that no matter what we do, no matter how perfect or imperfect it might be, someone is eventually going to come along and have a problem with it. And in that moment, the more willing we are to allow that, for all its discomfort, for all its ugliness, for all its imperfection, the more we're willing to allow that, the more we are able to reinforce the realest fact of all, which is that we continue to exist outside of all of that. And the more we honor that, the more free we feel and the more free we are. So today, I want you to think briefly of someone who pinches you. And it doesn't have to be physically pinches you, okay? But I want you to think of someone who crowds, who chokes something you love. And this isn't about blaming them, because the reality is we each are creating or allowing every single experience we're having, or imagining it, depending which angle you want to come at it from. The moment we're blaming someone else, we are stepping out of the one true reality that we are creating all of this, that you are creating all of this. So, bearing that in mind, picture a person, a place, or a situation that crowds who you are until it becomes uncomfortable, like a pinch. And allow yourself to feel what you think is uncomfortable versus what's actually uncomfortable about it to you. What belief are you identifying with that's getting stepped on, crunched, compromised by you? And yes, there's aggressors. And yes, there are acts that create victims. But we decide if we want to identify as a victim. We decide whether we're willing to continue to be an aggressor on any level with others. And we decide how we justify that or not. And not thinking about it doesn't mean we're not doing it. So today is a little bit about being willing to get less afraid of looking at things that we haven't wanted to look at before, owning things that we haven't wanted to own before, not because we don't believe they're there, but because they're ugly. They might not be perfect. Or worse, some of what we've been pretending isn't there. Some of what we've been pretending doesn't matter. Maybe the most beautiful parts of us. And when we realize that we do have the power to honor that we do have the power to let that beauty, that peace be in control of our lives, we come to realize that all those times in the past were nobody else's responsibility in the end but ours. Now, when you're two, I get it. We don't have a lot of choice. We need somebody else to help us be. eat and all of this, okay? But the thing is, for the vast majority of us, whether you believe this or not, it's true. The vast majority of us chose our charts. That doesn't mean we chose in advance every decision we were ever going to make. It means we chose our opportunities and some of the major themes of the challenges and confusion in our life as a strengthening exercise to learn what we like, what we don't like. It doesn't mean we invented that process, but we chose our flavors of experiences in that process. And when we understand a flavor, whether it's a flavor we want more of or a flavor we want less of, when we understand more about a flavor, it loses some of its excitement eventually, right? So we can keep a pattern and keep putting different jobs, different faces, different places into that flavor of scenario and experiencing different angles of that same dish. Or we can lean in to those flavors we're afraid of tasting. Now, there's some flavors, I won't get graphic, but there's some flavors that we know we don't like. We're not afraid of them. We just know we don't like them. If that's the case, when that's the case, why do we keep inviting those flavors into our experiences? Sometimes all that's left to learn about a type of experience is that we don't need to keep inviting that experience into our lives. So that's going to take two things. We're going to need to focus on more on what we do want in a different way. And we're going to have to carve some space in our daily menu and remove some of those flavors. And it's not about the people, places, or things all of the time, right? Yes, there's environments, there's relationships with certain people that are just prone to be more toxic. But that's part of the recognition. That's part of ordering what we want from the universe of life. And sometimes, for the vast majority of us, we've got to learn to cook our own meal, to prep our own snack, right? What if we took responsibility for that pinch, for that snack we don't like the taste of? What if you just considered, imagined the possibility, oh my gosh, I'm the one that tasted that snack. And it's not about being afraid of having our experiences in life. It's not afraid of tasting new things. It's allowing ourselves to get better acquainted with ourselves. And instead of feeling a need to pretend that these conflicts, these paradoxes don't exist within us, instead of trying to entrain ourselves to pretend that these don't exist, lean into them. If you're into somebody, you want to know about them. And hopefully you don't expect them to be perfect. That's that person's subtle nuances. Why are we not doing this more for ourselves? Why are we not willing to afford ourselves the same grace that we afford so many others? And if we're not in any moment willing to afford others grace, now that doesn't mean not having healthy boundaries. That doesn't mean allowing and or inviting people to abusive behaviors towards us. But this is about flavors and recognizing the patterns of our experiences and the patterns that we don't like until they become so concentrated they feel like a pinch. And the thing is, If you have a pair of jeans that fit you funny and they always pinch you in one spot, you get used to it, right? If that pinch were to go away after experiencing it every day because you had 3 pairs of the same jeans you're wearing twice a week back when we did that sort of thing, if you have a discomfort you're experiencing every day, that pinch spot can become numb, but it's still there. This exercise of focusing on what's pinching us, no matter what we identify initially with that pinch, it can bring up some really deep-seated stuff. So if you're going to open into this exercise, you need to commit to forgiving yourself, even if you can't instantly. You need to commit to telling yourself that you're going to forgive yourself for whatever you discover, because you are here to learn. That is one thing all of us have in common, is we're all here to learn about ourselves, from each other. And whatever you discover coming up, know that it already was all along. You are contributing for yourself and for others by learning more about it, whatever it is. So stop being afraid of the ugly. All of it. Yes, now stop. Be perfect. Stop being afraid of the imperfection. Allow yourself the grace to recognize a discomfort, a pinch that you've been ignoring. And it's not about picking up your weapon, even when your weapon's words, and going and attacking someone else. It's about owning your part in a pattern. And sometimes our part requires us to stand up more for ourselves. And sometimes our part requires us to maybe see a little more about where someone else might be coming from, and to recognize that maybe we're not allowing as much grace for others as we can. See how that works when we focus on allowing more grace for ourselves. It's okay if all of this is making things swim. When our minds get rearranged, it allows us to grow. And if our thought processes aren't confused or interrupted somehow, we're not able to change those tracks of thinking. Okay? So another thing we need to lean into, not 24/7, because we've got to rest, we've got to play, we've got to just be in between. But this work is real and it's necessary. And the days of pretending that it's not, and the world that we're creating, having this huge buffer that just allows us to stay asleep, that buffer's a lot thinner. And the turnaround time of karma is a lot shorter these days. So if you want to be more comfortable, you're going to need to learn to lean into those discomforts that were created by a pattern that, whether you inherited it from before your parents, whether you think you inherited it from your parents, whether it's as old as time, or whether you think it was created from relatively recent circumstances, it doesn't matter. You've got to recognize the pattern. And if you're willing to put your curiosity and imagination into it and focus it on leaning into recognizing those patterns one at a time, sometimes you'll see how they're connected to others naturally. And when you're willing to do that, this beautiful set of gifts unfolds. We get to see more layers. We get to find more peace. We get to identify with realer parts of ourselves as we scrape away those beliefs, because we realize we're in charge of what we get to choose to believe. Now, there's some people that believe that their actions should have no consequences. That winds up being a different level of the same process. But in that case, to protect those around us, that's one of the benefits of karma. So while there may be a lot of people imprisoned who shouldn't be physically imprisoned, some people need to be, because they don't recognize yet to have grace for themselves to the degree that various types of violence, whether it's actually beating somebody up or stealing from others, when they're not able to recognize the need for limits in order to not harm others, when that gets extreme enough, we have a punitive system for that. Now, with karma, sometimes those people go to jail, and sometimes they learn their lessons in other ways. And karma is not really meant as a punitive process, as a punishing process. But it can feel like that as long as we're not willing to accept the discomforts as a gift that's teaching us more about ourselves and more about the nature of how things really are. So, learning experience, punishment. It's all a matter of perspective. I'm picturing someone wearing those jeans again that pinch that one spot on the thigh or somewhere else, and every time they bend a certain way or start walking, they feel a pinch and they start turning around and like swinging at the person behind them because they just know that person's pinching them. That's what we do. That's what we do internally with so much of our energy and focus. If you feel hopeless, you are not yet at the place to start owning your happiness in that moment, in that angle, in that flavor. And so the first thing you're going to need to do for some of you, and this was the case for me, for quite a few of my processes, you're going to have to pick something you really, really want for yourself. And yes, you can pick $1 billion mansion, but I would recommend picking something smaller first. Smaller is more effective because there's fewer excuses available for why we can't do it. Just to start. Do you see somebody coloring and wish you had time to do that? Make time to do that. One of the ways we can make more time is if you notice you're scrolling with an activity, put that activity into closer together blocks of time, more controlled blocks. And with that time you save during the week from scrolling, start an effing gratitude journal. You don't have to buy a fancy one. I've written them on napkins. I've written things on toilet paper when I didn't have enough tissue. Not use toilet paper when I didn't have enough paper. And I didn't have a budget for enough paper at the time. Find a freaking way to document things to be happy about. Choose something that makes you happy that you'd like to do more of. And it doesn't need to start with a huge European vacation. And there's nothing wrong with having that as a goal. But until we get in the habit of allowing ourselves to want more happiness to be exercised in our lives in those little step-by-step ways, we're going to continue to allow that pattern that's not allowing ourselves to be and allowing ourselves to be happy no matter what. We're going to allow that pattern to continue. And the big goals, the longer term ones, don't stand a chance. And if they do, those aren't goals from your soul. Those aren't goals from the place we're trying to get to today. Those are things that our current patterns of our headspace still allow. And this is about growing. And it feels really uncomfortable. Even when it starts to feel better, that can often feel the most uncomfortable of all because it's foreign to us. So the pattern kind of signpost to watch for is, I feel pinched. If you can't get there, start with, where do I feel less pinched? When I'm coloring. When I'm dancing like a pretend ballerina, which I used to love to do when I was 3. But I don't let myself do now because I'm a grown-up. When I am listening to music that I love without worrying about judgment. Yay, headphones. You can get really, really cheap headphones. You can borrow some at a library if you need to. There's ways. You can, if you don't have headphones, you can go in the bathroom by yourself when nobody's around. Do something to hold more space, create more space for yourself, for your authentic comfort. Lean in to the fear of examining why you keep allowing discomfort. And this isn't about changing everything at once. So today we're going to start by focusing on one little pinch. Y'all have a lovely day or week, depending when you find me next, or which platform you're on.